Whoops, one moment. There we go. All right, bear with me. I have so many windows open here. There we go. All right, well, it is 5:05 and I suggest that we get started. We have a fair amount to cover this evening, so I just want to welcome everybody, and I hope you're in the right Zoom meeting. I always have a little bit of anxiety. Am I in the right call? This is Municipal Light Plants 101, and this is a co-hosted event. I am Sarah Dooling. I am Executive Director at the Massachusetts Climate Action Network, also known as MCAN. And co-hosting this event with MCAN is the Environmental League of Massachusetts. Claire Kelly of ELM is here with us this evening. Hingham Net Zero is also a co-sponsor of this event, and Laura Burns, who will be one of our speakers, is representing Hingham Net Zero. And in addition, we have two partner orgs that are affiliated with tonight's event, and that is the Massachusetts chapter of the Sierra Club and 350 Mass Action. And all of these orgs, we are really committed to getting the Commonwealth to zero emissions by 2050, if not earlier, and using clean energy and thinking about the role of public utilities in promoting clean energy and energy efficiency in meeting our carbon reduction goals. Now, for those of you who joined earlier, we just ask that you remain muted. People have been sharing your names and towns in the chat, and that's great. We have a great geographic representation. Now, Claire, if we could start recording the webinar. If you do not wish to be recorded, you can go on no video and your face will not be captured in the recording. We will be sending out a link to the recording, as well as a link to all of the slides from this evening, and a Google form that folks can fill out about next steps if you are inspired to run for a light board, if you want to learn more about what either ELM or MCAN does around muni advocacy. That form will help us be in contact with you. So let's all enjoy the fact that we didn't have to shovel any snow, I hope, in order to get to your computer this evening. And it's really great to have all of you here. So we are going to go through our speakers, and I ask that you do hold questions until the end. And we have been intentional in the planning of this event to leave about 20 minutes of time for a Q&A that I will moderate at the end. However, please do drop your questions into the chat, and I will extract them and be sure to refer to them during our Q&A session. Okay. And so we have a big lineup. And first up, we're going to listen to Chris Roy, General Manager from Shrewsbury Selco, followed by Laura Burns, Hingham Net Zero Advocacy Group, followed by myself. And then we're going to pass the baton to Tim Hebert, Chief Operating Officer of E&E. And we will close out this evening with Oriana Sifanum from Environmental League of Massachusetts. And then at that point,
I just wanted to point out that Chris Roy is not the general manager of Shrewsbury Gas and Cable. That we don't do gas. I mean, we have a lot of.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. We have a lot of hot air windbags like me in town, but they don't capture my emissions. So anyway.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And so with that, Chris, it sounds like there are many people in the audience here that could actually introduce you far better than I could. So I am going to put myself on mute, and Chris, I yield the floor to you, and you just let me know when to advance your slides.
All right, well, thanks for having me. This is a great gathering of folks. So So I figured I'll go through since there's a lot of details here, and I'll cover the high level summary as best I can, and I'm happy to take questions at any time, whether it be now or later. So, so starting with the first slide. I should mention, well, I guess to your point, my name is there. I'm the general manager of Shrewsbury Electric and Cable Operations. And I started back in July. And prior to that, I was general manager in Belmont for 2 years. And then prior to that, I had held several roles at Concord Light. So, and I, in the tiles there, I saw some familiar names. So hello to you. Nice to see you. And so, yeah, so with that, maybe we'll go to the next slide. So here we tried to draft up some form of chart to help illustrate the structure and really the when you compare it to the next slide, the power, you know, the pun intended, that the public power model really has. So right now, most folks are familiar with their incumbent private utility that you know, that is primarily right in your national grid, your Eversource, and your Unitil. And so where that comes into play with policy making and initiatives in general, you can see here, we made a big bold line there where there's really a divide between the local community. The local decision making, you know, about what to do for each individual community is really independent and not often probably never solicited from the local community. So whether you're talking in Selco's particular case, you know, we have electric and cable, but you know, those folks never talk. You know, in the private utility world, National Grid doesn't go out and solicit policy making advice from each of the communities they serve, whereas in the MLPs, right, we tailor to each individual group. So that's what we see on the next slide, if you will. Now it's unified, right? So that big dividing line goes away. And so just to draw up some comparisons to perhaps models that folks are familiar with already, right? In the local community, you have a board of selectmen or select board, depending if the name was changed. You have a school committee behind the tile of folks I have here. And then similar to that, right? Those are both elected positions, and the vast majority of MLPs in Massachusetts, of which there are 41, for those that might not know, there's a Municipal Light Plant Board of Commissioners, Light Board. Those are really the two main titles, and they're elected like the other elected roles here. And so it's not in this tile here, but really if you look at the labeling of a point, anything above that, those are your policymakers for your local community. And why this is important, and we'll get into some of these points, and I apologize if I repeat myself a little bit, but why this matters is that there's a unity here. And I think, you know, folks can all agree that the energy sector is one portion of the equation, but there's other elements, right? When you talk about strategic electrification, demand side management, your buildings within your community, you know, drawing in the schools, right? When they develop a new school, is that school going to go with gas furnaces, oil boilers, or are they going to go with heat pumps? And so here you can see with that tier above the appoint level, that's your policy making. And for the most part, you'll see unity across the board there, where you know, it's a gauge to see, you know, if you're noticing a particular energy policy on the light plant side, perhaps then it might be worth looking at, well, is the town under the Board of Selectmen a green community? Or is the school committee building an elementary school that's all fossil fueled? And so that's where, you know, you start to see, you know, the aggregation of the you know, I guess political will of a particular community, because you have that insight. It's not aggregated under the umbrella of a utility, which is then regulated by the state. You can actually see the granular details, much like this is an election year. So much like you can go back to the map and see which towns voted for which particular presidential candidate. You see that level of granularity with policy making, and that's reflected on the public power side. So if you would not mind going to slide 4, just as for thoroughness, of the 41 I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but the vast majority are elected. But there are, I'm going to go on a limb and say maybe between 4 and 6 or so that are appointed. And so, there was some trend, and I wasn't around, but in the 50s, to migrate 5 or 6 of these MLPs from the elected role for the boards to an appointment role. So here in Shrewsbury's particular model, the town manager appoints the commissioners. In other towns, it could be the mayor or other officials. So I just threw in here, of the 5 or 6, probably half are town manager appointed, and the other half might be something else. So just to say, out of the 41, the vast majority are elected, but then you have half a dozen maybe that are in the appointed model. So on slide 5, so kind of reiterating some of the points why that structure matters. It is local control. It's appointed and elected, and the idea behind that is to be a reflection of the policy making of that particular community. And so, so with that comes the responsibilities of balancing the priorities for a particular community. That's where some of the challenges come in for any type of policy, whether it be, I don't know, climate or schools or zoning. It's very much dependent on what the local leadership in those communities feel is best for their particular constituency. And so because of that structure then, though, that elected or appointed body sets the policy, and that creates the accountability. And so that's where you start to get those elected bodies or appointed bodies then appoint a general manager, on the MLP side, a town manager on the town side, a superintendent on the school side. And so then we are accountable to implement the policies of that local community. And so, what those policies are, as we can all, I think, agree, vary tremendously from one place to another. And then, but the accountability there is second to none, right? If you ask any local official, it's hard to go get groceries. And so if you did something that might be against what your community thinks, you're going to hear about it when you're trying to pick out apples. And so that's a level of accountability that drives performance, whereas you don't have that safety net, if you will, of a disconnect between, did it take too long to restore power? Well, I don't know, no one's ever going to see me, so I don't have to answer to it. Whereas I know I'm going to hear about it if we didn't perform up to stuff. And then that drives reliability, which is that 4th bullet. And again, I know this isn't an operational presentation here, but that's just the other piece of the pie is much like schools, right? We have schools that some are regionalized for sure, but either way, that's local. Every dollar in that community for tax purposes for a school goes to advancing education in that community. Same with here. Every dollar that someone pays or contributes to an energy efficiency fund or a power supply initiative goes to that MLP, which is then reinvested in infrastructure. If you're in a bigger service territory, you pay your electric bill, you could be funding a project in another state. So there's that localized investment opportunities where you pay your bill, maybe that goes into some kind of renewable investment in that community, if not an infrastructure investment. So then next slide just kind of shows, in pink for our purposes, the MLPs of Massachusetts. So we're scattered about in there, and that's just for reference. So I guess next slide, we'll cover some more. So these are just reiterating some of those stats. There are some MLPs that serve more than one community. So that's where you get 50 communities out of 41 municipal light plants. There are 50 communities because some are served by one location. And so, the roughly speaking, that equivalents to about 10, 11, I forget the exact stat. I'm sure Tim actually knows a lot of these, but 11, 12% of the electric load across the 41 MLP territories. And so the big ones there are many differences, and as you could probably tell, I'm just trying to hit the high level details. But there's a lot of investment opportunities that the MLPs have, much like, I'm trying to draw the parallels to commonly known community structures where you can invest in roads and bridges and schools and buildings. Communities with MLPs, those communities can make the investments in their respective energy platforms. If you want a solar field, you can go invest in it. You want a battery, go get a battery. And it wasn't, and that's where some of the historical contractual existing arrangements come in where, these are long-term commitments. So 20 years ago, you still see MLPs that made investments in nukes and in gas plants. But that's a big factor to consider is, what did this conversation look like 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Because that's how long some of these contracts last, and they're in place, and that has to be incorporated as a manager in the strategy to achieve the policies that are implemented from our local boards. And so, we'll start to get into the next slide in a minute, but those last 2 points I just wanted you to keep in mind is we're, as a public agency, all of our activities, aside from some nuances with pricing, with some of the power, generating facilities where there's a competitive need to keep it secret, it's all transparent. So you can see, what everyone's paid, what we spend our money on, what investments we made in infrastructure. It's all there. You can trace the dollar to where it went and how it benefited your community. That's not so much the case in the private sector, as everyone knows. And so the fourth bullet, tying it all together, electricity is the only source that can be clean. And so by having, this insight into how a unified platform between how zoning is done in a community, how buildings are built in a community, how charging infrastructure is completed, all of that is unified in this public power model. I talk, I don't call it every day almost, with my peers in the other departments, and that's true coordination. And, and as they pursue building, Shrewsbury is looking at building a police station. And I've talked with the town manager, all right, well, what are we looking at for HVAC? Because we can help in that respect for coordinating strategic electrification of the buildings, which then ties to what we do with the energy policy on the electric side. So I guess that leads to the next slide, which is, I think, a really key point, which I like to highlight, and subject to anyone doing some QA on this, 42% lower, the rates are 42% lower in public power communities. And so what does that mean? A lot of these conversations talk about cost and price and how are vulnerable communities subject to some of these initiatives. Well, just a key point here, if every community had a public power entity today at the average rates that are charged, you would have, but we held the rates at what IOUs are charging today, all the initiatives are fully funded. We've done studies that show with it, it sounds big, but in MLP community that raises rates between 20 and 30%, depending on who you are. You're at 100%, you have enough investment funds there to fully get yourself to 100% non-emitting and still have rates lower than IOUs. So, that's the power of this model, where the efficiencies unlock financial opportunities there to do those investments. But that's all subject to the policies that are enacted by each location. And then last slide is, just a more summaries of some of our thoughts on that. Everyone is different. There's a different, if you have a community with one particular political leaning, I'd be willing to bet that the policies for those boards and commissions, regardless of department, are going to be more in alignment with that. And so, it's that challenging one size fits all policy where it may not work, because it's almost a true reflection of democracy, where you know, the policies that are voted in by this very same folks that are voting for political positions. So, you know, so obviously if they're being asked to do something that they, as a community as a whole, even don't necessarily agree with, it's going to be a challenge. And so us as managers and in the respective utilities we operate, we are by statute required to enable and accomplish the policies that are adopted by our boards. And so that's where, you know, some of the discussions that everyone knows more about probably than me, but you know, some of those last two bullets of, well, how, you know, what do you do to be that flexible? And so that's where we've seen some of the recent legislation that sets, you know, floors and not necessarily ceilings, and it gives a little more freedom to figure out how to get there. And that's that pathway that enables some of the freedoms locally to decide how to get there. So, but that's it in a nutshell. I'm not sure if I went over my allotted time, but that's my portion. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. Again, I just ask that if you have questions, drop them into the chat and I will grab them as I stop sharing my screen and turn the screen over to Laura Burns.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I'm so glad that Chris ended up with one size does not fit all, because you're going to see here just one community's experience with, wait a minute. Oh, stop. One community's experience with engaging our muni, and it's going to be different in every town. Every town is different. And we have people from many muni towns on the call who I hope can answer questions. So I'm going to blast through this to give you one example of how you can do this, and then hopefully we can have more of a discussion. So Hingham Net Zero got started a year and a half ago, and our original goal was Hingham needs a climate action plan. Three of us sat down in a living room and said, we need to do this. And this was inspired by the work of other towns, including muni towns such as Concord and Belmont. And we do expect to have this before town meeting in April of 2021, the proposal that Hingham should create a climate action plan. But what happened while we were organizing for this is we got big and people started joining us. New members brought incredible new ideas and energy. And so now we have 3 action groups. We have community engagement that does online forums on things like, how do you do solar on your roof in a muni town? Climate coaching, I'll help you, walk you through buying an EV, visibility, like, you know, standouts like you saw. We have a social media group that keeps the word out on website and Facebook. And we have the Light Plant Action Group, which is what we are here to talk about tonight. So if you live in a muni light plant town, you are utility owners. You elect your light plant board, or you elect the people who appoint them, and that is democratic power that you can take and use. So in HMLP, Hingham Municipal Light Plant has a 3-member elected board and 1 climate activist member elected in 2016, Roger Freeman, who may or may not be on this call, I have no idea. But thanks to that board member, he's done a lot of great reform work. We changed our net metering policies. We have added sustainability to the mission statement of the light plant, and they've been working on moving towards carbon neutrality. How are we engaging? We attend the board meetings, and that's interesting because most of these utilities are, well, Hingham Municipal Light Plant just celebrated its 125th anniversary. Some of these are over a century old, and they have never had anyone show up at a meeting before. So this is a new thing for them. And sometimes board members don't know what their requirements are under the open meeting law or notification. So we have had some issues around that. We do get people who are on our email list. We have a very active group of say 20 to 25 and then 120 people on our email list. So when we want to promote something, we ask people to send emails and letters to the board. And that is also a new experience for light board members. They're shocked that people would like to offer their opinions. And that's been really a really good experience. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my slideshow. So anyway, we offer concrete proposals for board action. For example, when we got started several years ago, Roger Freeman urged the board to go carbon free on our portfolio by purchasing renewable energy certificates to offset the carbon emitting portion of their portfolio. So looking at the portfolio, you see the green is renewable, the blue is nuclear. And this is very, Chris probably knows better than I do, but this is very common for munis to have a big chunk of nuclear power in their portfolio, and the rest is carbon emitting. So what they did was they get renewable energy credits with their green energy, and they didn't sell them, they retired them, and then they bought RECs to offset the rest of their portfolio. They were class 1 RECs, which means they are local. They're for local facilities, and they encourage the creation of new facilities. But we urged them to continue that practice. They were reconsidering it. And instead, this year, they sold all their class 1 RECs and purchased class 2 RECs, which are less preferable. They tend to be facilities that are farther away, like Texas Wind or Maine Hydro. And they do not, when you purchase them, really encourage the development of new facilities. They're usually for facilities that have long been in existence. So they, sorry about that. So they sold the class 1 RECs, they bought class 2 RECs to cover the entire portfolio. Technically speaking, I suppose we are still carbon neutral, but the sale netted $660,000 to the bottom line when they sold those class 1 RECs and bought class 2. So I think everyone was a little bit surprised at how much we brought in. And there was an informal feeling on the light board that they wanted to do something with the funds that would promote sustainability. So the light board chair invited proposals, and we had a lot of really good ideas, needless to say. So we sat down and we thought about it, and we came up with a list of 20 ideas, and then we focused on 4. And I'm going to show you the 4 that we focused on. Don't take those as the ones that you should pursue, because one size does not fit all. And we made our choices based on, yes, carbon reduction, how much does it bring, but also local facts and what the board was like and where we were in Hingham. So the 4 proposals that we gave them in the summer were, we would like the light board to make a grant to the town of Hingham to fund its climate action plan development, because it's coming before town meeting. It's going to cost money for a consultant to help us develop that plan, and it will be easier to pass if the light plant would contribute. And so that was a request. We requested they improve their energy efficiency and their conversion to electric heat incentives, which were out of date. We asked them to convert their solar installation incentive from a bill credit to a rebate. They were giving a chunk of money when you install solar as a credit, which takes forever to come back to the consumer. And we asked them to change it to a rebate, so it would actually help people with money up front to put up solar. And finally, we urged them to start thinking about how they could develop solar canopy projects in town. We thought municipal buildings would be a good place to start, although there may be other opportunities. But because of how Chris spoke about how the town is all one big thing where everybody talks together, that might be a sensible place to start. So we proposed this to the board. We didn't actually hear anything formal back from the board, but we began discussions directly with the light plant manager, because these are all things that the light plant manager can choose to do. So here are our results from those. The first one, this is in progress. It may be that they will make this grant. We're going to see. We're still talking about it. They did improve their energy efficiency and conversion incentives, could be improved more, but they did get that all up to date by working with E&E, who you will hear from later on this subject. They did convert their solar installation incentive from a bill credit to a rebate. And this is my favorite part. What we discovered when we went to the school department and said, have you thought about this, putting solar on the new middle school that is solar ready but has no panels on it? They said, yeah, we have thought about that. But we talked to the light plant, but nothing really came of it. And the light plant said, well, we talked to the school department, but nothing really came of it. And the business manager for the school said, it's because there is no one to drive this project. So we said, okay, if you're willing, we the citizens will drive this project. We will help you make connections. Try not to get out in front of the officials because you make the decisions, but we're going to be the driver. And so that is underway. That's what we're doing. So what have we learned through this process? We were really surprised at the immediate upsurge of support from community. People were dropping out of the sky with talent and experience and enthusiasm, and it was really exciting. All of our ideas come from the group, and people pursue what they feel inspired to do, but we have found it's very easy to have too much on your plate. There's so many great ideas. They're coming out of our heads. We should do this, we should do that. But you need to suit your actions to the resources that you have available, or you will fail to get anything done. So we try to make our choices based on what the carbon reduction of it is, but we take other factors into account. And we are excited and hopeful. I hope this is helpful, and I hope you can hear from some other people who are in other light plant towns when we get to the question and answer section.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Laura. You have applause from Steve Miller and Gail Page. Excellent. And I just wanted to do some framing. So we had Chris Roy really open up our session tonight by saying this is a public power model, right? Not only in terms of energy, but in terms of people. And then Laura Burns, we really wanted to have you all hear from Laura, who has been advocating in Hingham for a long time, very effectively, and kind of understands what Chris was emphasizing, that every muni district is unique, not only in terms of geography and racial demographics, but in terms of the local policies that advocates can plug into and navigate and try to coordinate different strategies for increasing clean energy, increasing energy efficiency at the local level. So I am going to present now, so bear with me while I share my screen with all of you. Okay, and can you all see that? Thumbs up. Okay, one moment. There we go. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Dooling. I'm Executive Director at Massachusetts Climate Action Network. And we have been around since 2000. We have a network of over 60 affiliate groups across the Commonwealth. And we help with our local advocates on clean energy, energy efficiency plans, programs, policies, regulations, and then we coordinate all of our affiliate groups to address state level change. And so our theory of change is that we start local and we go up to the state. So it really is rooted, what we do is really about local action, and it's about people. We're not focusing explicitly, directly, firstly on carbon. It's really about mobilizing the political power to create a breathable, safe future for everyone in the Commonwealth. We have a variety of different campaigns. The Municipal Light campaign is one of our, it's one that's really near and dear to my heart. And Logan Malik, who is on the call with us this evening, he is MCAN's new Clean Energy Director. So you all will hear from Logan at some point after this webinar. But we have the tools, advocates have the tools, we have the tools to really work at the local level with muni districts. And so I just want to go over, some opportunities advocates have for working with your muni in your muni district. And so one place to start is to really, and Chris was very articulate about this, how can your muni be part of the climate solution? What are the multiple ways that munis generate benefit for your community? Not only in terms of, on average, a lower electricity cost, energy cost compared to the IOUs, but also in terms of the energy efficiency and clean energy programs that are offered that then convey they improve the environmental conditions by reducing the amount of polluting energy used in your town. And so even though MLPs, they're sort of this overlooked sector of utilities in Massachusetts, they really can be leaders in developing these innovative approaches so that the Commonwealth can meet our carbon reduction goals outlined in the Global Warming Solutions Act. Now, does anybody know when the first MLP was established in the Commonwealth? Does anybody know? I can't see everybody on chat, so you could unmute yourself and say a year if you think you know what that is. And I don't think Chris Roy should answer. Anybody else?
1892.
1892 in Wellesley, I believe, right? Is that true? I think that's accurate. So these districts have been around a very long time. So that's important to note. And in terms of where advocates, so we're going to speed up to 2020, in terms of where advocates can plug in, there are some important regulatory background information that can be helpful. So in 2020, the Municipal Light Plants were granted what's called formal participation in a program called the Residential Conservation Services Program. And that was ordered by the Department of Public Utilities. And all this means is that the Residential Conservation Services as a statute, that was signed into law back in 1980. And that created the framework for residential in-home energy efficiency services. So that's the regulatory framework. And in 2020, the MLPs were ordered by DPU to formally participate in RCS. Now, that means that the MLPs must submit what is called an energy efficiency plan to the Department of Energy Resources. This means for advocates that there is a document and there is a formal process for you to engage with your muni around these plans. So before I talk about that, MCAN, when we think about energy efficiency programs that munis can offer, MCAN has identified 5 broad categories of energy efficiency. And I'm going to talk about the on-bill financing last. But the space heating and cooling, these are incentives that munis can offer that promote the purchasing and installation of technologies like air source heat pumps, which is a technology that is cleaner and has lower operational costs compared to oil and gas and propane options. Secondly, the electric vehicle is a fascinating opportunity, and people can work with your munis to get your electrical vehicle to give energy back to the grid by installing what are called these bi-directional chargers and smart meters. And with the idea being that leveraging the electric vehicle to grid connection will help shave the peak, okay? Third, air sealing and weatherization. You know, I'm sitting in a kind of a leaky room right now, and it's really cold. And so wouldn't it be nice if somebody could come in here and seal up my leaky home and other buildings. And so most munis conduct what many of you know as these home energy assessments to determine your baseline energy use, and then use those data to then help you figure out, you know, do you want a rebate, or there are other incentives to do some weatherization. So plug the leaks and get a tighter envelope and have a lower utility bill. Water heating. So conventional domestic hot water technology requires a lot of energy, and air source heat pumps are an efficient technology that captures the heat from the surrounding air and transfers it directly to the water. Now, this last piece is on-bill financing, also known as inclusive financing. This at this point in time has legal ambiguity in Massachusetts. And so we are working, Laura Burns is part of a group trying to assess a legal pathway for this for MLPs moving forward. So how can you engage in your muni? Well, these municipal action plans that I mentioned earlier follow a chronology within a calendar. So annually by October 1, the MAP is submitted to the Department of Energy Resources for the following year. And that's a moment where you can request or you can attend a public meeting to review the plan. You can create a task force that offers comments to the on the plan. Later in that same month, the assessment is done of the prior year's residents that have been served. And so you again can attend a light board meeting and give testimony. And in the slides here, I have connected to Holyoke's municipal action plan is just one example. And in the interest of time, I won't click on it, but it will be in the final slides that you will receive after this event. Speed up to June. Now, all of a sudden, DOER is updating the draft outcomes based on quarterly reports submitted by the MLPs. So again, this is a great opportunity to attend a public meeting and provide comments. Here is a link to the DOER events page. There are no June meetings listed yet, but that is where to go. By July, DOER finalizes those outcomes for all that are in the municipal action plans. And this is the moment when you can really start working with the Light Board and really thinking about innovative strategies that go beyond some of the minimum outcomes. This is where what Chris was talking about and what Laura was talking about is super important. What are on the books currently in your Muni district? Is there a climate action plan that you can connect your MLP with? Is there a greenhouse gas inventory that, again, you can connect the MLP with? So be creative and think about ways to align your MLP with other policy levers in your district. That's really important. So what's next? We're going to figure out the legality of on-bill financing. MCAN does a Municipal Light Plant scorecard that we are going to be releasing in February 2021. So look for that. And when you think about your Muni district, it's really not just about the customers or you as a resident that benefits. This is really about also protecting the environment, breathable, less polluted air. So as an advocate, connect with your neighbors. If you are in a Muni district, get involved in your local light board. And that's part of the reason we are hosting this webinar this evening, to really hope to inspire folks to get engaged in their Muni district. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my slides. Okay. And our second to last speaker, Mr. Timothy Hebert, you are on deck.
Okay. Working on sharing the screen. All right, is that working?
We can see it, but we see all the controls. You may want to use present mode.
Yeah, I'm working on it. It doesn't seem to want to. There we go.
You got it.
All right. Eagle has landed. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity. It's great to be here with everybody. Nice to see some familiar names on the attendee list. As Sarah said, I'm Tim Hebert. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Energy New England. We are a Massachusetts cooperative of municipal utilities. We work with about 25 of the light plants throughout the state. We're located in Mansfield, Mass, which is actually a municipal light plant itself. And we're a little bit along the lines of what MWEC is as a joint action agency in Western Mass. So there's a number of agencies that help municipal light plants in Massachusetts. You know, picking up on a little bit of what Chris said and seeing some of the folks who are on listening in tonight. Why we exist is partly because many municipal light plants are relatively small entities and don't always have the staff internally that may be able to be charged with getting after green energy, providing efficiency programs, developing programs, rebates, processing rebates, and the like. So we're really kind of a support services organization for a number of our customers. And just to kind of go around the horn, they told me 2 or 3 slides, so I even dispensed with the title slide to keep things tight tonight. But we provide a number of things to public power to try to help them achieve their own goals. Everything that we do is, again, as service to the utility. We will help them develop programs. I'll talk about that a little bit with regard to the electric vehicle and efficiency programs that we assist with or develop and operate for our customers. So just kind of going around the horn, starting in the top right. Wholesale services, that's where we're doing a lot of green procurement, commodity procurement, price, cost management. We're very active in the ISO New England markets. And, you know, somebody asked me recently, what have been the big two things you've been working on lately? And I would say the last several years have been the combination of decarbonizing portfolios and figuring out the best way for light plants to pursue distributed resources. Things like battery storage devices. E&E has been working with Braintree Electric for about 2.5 years now, operating their 2 megawatt battery that they put in back in the middle of 2018. On one hand, to provide savings against peak costs, capacity and transmission, but also kind of eventually marrying up with a landfill solar array and kind of making the maximum use of that solar production. Moving around to government affairs, our E&E strategies practice is very busy at the state and local level, working with municipal light plants to really advocate for their positions. One big thing in particular right now that's happening is that I'm sure this group has talked a lot about many of the renewable portfolio standards, clean energy standards don't necessarily apply to public power, but the 41 municipals that Chris Roy mentioned earlier kind of all banded together and worked to submit a municipal greenhouse gas emission standard that's actually part of the Roadmap 2050 bill that's in Climate Conference Committee right now. And we're working to try to get that out of committee by January 5th. Many of our utilities actually do try to either mirror or approximate RPS, kind of varies customer by customer. And I think that's an important point. Certainly listening to what Laura had to say about Hingham Light, who is a customer and a part owner of Energy New England. You know, they've taken an approach where, as Laura mentioned, they chose to sell some of their class 1 RECs, buy class 2 RECs, and then the question is, what do they do with the proceeds? I think the good news is municipal light plants have a lot of operating flexibility to try to be creative around these things. You know, on one hand, Chris mentioned the rate competitiveness that they enjoy. That provides a lot of operational latitude. And I think, as you'll see, I think a number of them have pursued quite a bit of decarbonization in their portfolios, but trying to do that on a balanced cost basis for their customers. Our conservation and efficiency, we've been providing residential conservation services since about 2000. That is one of the programs that are mandated by the state to municipal utilities. Again, generally they don't have the support staff to implement those internally, and we find a lot of economies of scale in helping them do that. I think importantly, this year, obviously we're all on a Zoom call now, not just because of a snowstorm, but because of COVID. You know, we pivoted very quickly and tried to develop a virtual audit, a remote audit where we weren't able to send auditors into folks' homes. And that's helped kind of keep that ball rolling, maybe a little bit less so than had we not had, you know, a global pandemic. But it's made options available to utility customers to kind of keep that interest in, if you want an audit, you can have a remote audit. You may be walking around with an iPad. That's true, and we can do things virtually. We've also set up an online audit as well. Early this year, we combined forces with utility services up in Vermont, kind of rounds out our service set a little bit. That's around compliance, security, reliability. And a lot of these things are kind of tied into where the industry is going, kind of in general. Talk briefly on what we've been up to for no carbon procurement. I think it's important to note that each municipal light plant may have a different policy as to how it wants to procure resources. Obviously, as the folks on this call know, there are all sorts of different demographics in the various light plants. So there will be some who have lots of local pressure or interest in getting as green as they can, as fast as they can. And there are some who don't have a lot of that pressure, and they may have local demographics that are a lot more interested in the lowest possible cost. So it's a little bit of all flavors. What we try to do is look for opportunities to help our customers reduce the carbon in their portfolios in as cost-effective a manner as possible. And I think what this slide shows is over the last 10 years or so, there have been a number of strides taken. Not everything is for everybody. I've got, the hydro, wind, solar, and even the nuclear piece that was talked about a little bit earlier, that we've tried to be creative and find ways, for instance, to add large solar resources on the bottom left of this slide, while at the same time doing some complementary things to try to balance that kind of intermittent production. As the sun's getting lower in the sky, you're getting less energy out of the solar array later in the day. That's often when demand and prices are higher. So we try to find ways to add the solar and then add something complementary to provide additional value to the light department. The net zero goal for 2050, the draft legislation right now has a 50% carbon-free target for 2030. And that's where a lot of our customers are really moving towards. In fact, a number of them are there already. Some of that is from existing existing nuclear commitments. We talked about that a little bit, but hopefully this slide suggests that they've been pretty active in adding a number of different types of resources, trying to create diversity and value for their customers. All the wind on this slide all comes with Class 1 RECs. Which muni retires it, that's very much a local decision, retiring RECs. As we go forward, as the percentages increase in the greenhouse gas emission standard, I think we'll see quite a number of municipals move toward retiring them, and those that don't, often kind of like the Hingham situation, kind of deciding what to do with the proceeds if they are selling those RECs. Solar, those first three do come with Class 1 RECs. The bottom one, the behind the meter, those are arrays located within municipal territories. They're a little bit older and they had solar RECs attached to them. Those arrays, generally the municipals do not buy the RECs, but that was really price driven because solar RECs were very, very expensive. Moving right along, I don't want to run over here. On the efficiency side of the house, talked a little bit about the other folks have talked about electrification. Certainly the heat pump piece. It's nice to find something that kind of helps both the light plant, the environment, and the customer, kind of a win-win-win. As other folks have said, decarbonizing electricity and then driving additional electrification is a great combined solution. We've been active in working with our customers in abode energy management on a heat pump program. I have 5 utilities involved in that right now. Our EV marketing, outreach, education support program has 15 municipal utilities participating. That's great. Where I live here in Taunton, there are incentives for a level 2 charger, a rebate if I buy a new EV, wish those were cheaper, by the way, and a rebate if I buy a used EV. And in fact, that's a place where we focus a little bit. There's a lot of older EVs coming back on the market as used vehicles, often at pretty attractive prices. Great way to get in to an electric vehicle the first time. The Develop product is kind of a do-it-yourself toolkit. That's available really to any municipality, whether it's a municipal utility or not. And that's something where if a municipality may want really the tools to develop their own program, that's something they can use for that. Top right, Energy Expert, that is part of our solution for that online audit capability and a marketplace for energy efficient equipment. And we've got a half a dozen utilities participating in that. And, you know, I think with regards to the municipal action plan, that's something that we help a number of our customers put together. And it's absolutely an evolving space. You know, we see more customers interested in more services and products to make available to their customers. So I think we're really going in a solid direction kind of across the board. And, you know, with that, I don't want to take too much time. Thanks again for the opportunity to talk to this group tonight, and I look forward to questions.
Great, thank you, Tim. That was wonderful. So very quickly, we are going to transition to Oriana from ELM, and we will close out this session after Oriana speaks. Oriana, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you. I've never shared my screen. Never had this power. So, okay, so hi and thank you. I'm Sarah. My name is Oriana Sifenum, and I'm the campaign organizer for the Environmental League Massachusetts Action Fund. And it's really exciting and encouraging to see all of you guys looking forward to getting involved and learning more about MLPs. And we just wanted to encourage people. We have a program. This is our second year. The ELM Action Fund is running this program for candidates running for MLP boards across Massachusetts. And our program, we have a coalition of organizations and supporters that help support these candidates through trainings and provide resources. And we facilitate spaces for candidates to share ideas, and we have meetings with each other. And last year, we were very excited to have 5 candidates that ran for office across Massachusetts, and 4 were elected to their local boards and have already started working towards these energy issues. And so if you don't know who sits on your MLP board, it's really easy to look up. You can even find it through the MCAN website, and it could be you. And so this is a little bit about our program. And if you are interested in running, my email is below, and I'll also drop it through the chat. And continuing on, I think. So if you don't live in an MLP town, for example, I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts, and there's not that many in Western Mass, but you can still sign up to volunteer for a candidate in another town. You can join our coalition. 350 Mass Action and the Sierra Club are some of the organizations that we have on our coalition already, and you just sign up, you can come to our meetings. And volunteering on this, you can help make calls, reach out to voters, help with writing mail, and supporting all of their efforts in running for these campaigns and making sure we have the right candidates moving these energy issues forward. And these, as everyone has said, just to reiterate it, these elections are important because these people sitting on the boards and these commissioners have incredible policy-making power surrounding municipal clean energy decisions that impact the entire state of Massachusetts and are where we stand energy-wise. So I will be sending out a form in the chat, and this is just a follow-up to answer just a few questions. If you're interested in running for office, if you want to find out more, if you want to volunteer, join our coalition, sign up for the newsletter, just encapsulating everything in that form. It's just 2 minutes, and thank you for your time, and thank you for taking the time to learn more about MLPs tonight, and we look forward to working with all of you. So I will pass it back over to Sarah.
Thank you so much.
How to do this. Oh, there it goes.
Thank you so much, Oriana. And thank you to all of our speakers. We are unfortunately past time. So what I propose to everybody on this call is that for those of you who can stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes, we can take a few questions. However, I also completely understand if people need to go make dinner for their aging parents, which is what I'm going to be doing after this call. So with that, I am going to pull up, actually, this question was raised a couple of times, and that we have both Tim and Chris on this call this evening. Could you describe for us some of the process by which a new muni could be established? And this came up in the chat a couple of times. It's technical, it's complicated, it can be very expensive, but I think this question has come into my inbox at least 4 or 5 times this past week, probably in anticipation of this webinar. And I think it captures some of the interest around, using community, mobilizing community interest and grassroots energy to, increase the amount of renewable energy that a town or a community can have access to, and establishing a new muni is potentially one way of doing that. So do either Chris or Tim have a concise response to that question?
Chris, you want to take a shot at that?
One of my favorite questions. I'd be happy to, let's see if I can put that in 20 seconds. So there are provisions in law to allow a municipal light plant to be formed. It's the one that hasn't changed since the late 1800s. The challenge there is in the 1800s, a lot of those, were sparked by dissatisfaction in service or even street lighting at the time. And so there wasn't a lot of infrastructure in place, but now there's a lot of infrastructure, and that infrastructure is the profit engine for the private utilities. So obviously there's a lot of resistance to getting rid of that. And so the mechanism is there. It's 2 meetings, 2 votes at town meeting, separated something like less than 18 months apart. And that gets an MLP organization or entity, formed in a town. And then the barrier to entry is now when that town pursues acquisition of the assets, there's no clear mechanism to set a value to that. So the utility says, well, the assets in that community are worth $10 trillion. And the town says, well, wait a minute, I'm looking out there and the pole's leaning over and rotten. I'd say that's worth $0. And so there's no mechanism in there. There are some cases in there that show they did replacement costs, less depreciation in the last effort. And so that results in pretty astronomical prices for that infrastructure anyway. So it's really, it's beyond just a simple acquisition of assets, and what's not factored into that as much is a lot of the things we've talked about today. But that's the 1-minute version. I think that would fit that question.
Excellent. That was very helpful, Chris. That's really helpful. I do have another kind of interesting question from Melissa. How do you get an MLP board to move from being appointed to being elected? Is there a process in place to make that transition? Is Tim or Chris?
I could field that one as well. So that one falls strictly at town meeting. They're the group that dictates governance structure in a community, and so that basically is framing a warrant article to basically modify either the bylaws or a charter, depending on the town, or whatever a city might have. And so it's a summary is it's a town meeting vote based on a warrant article that modifies whatever governing document is in place at the time.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to, don't worry, I'm still paying attention. I'm just toggling to my Word document here to grab some more questions. Okay. These are all some of these are very complicated questions. So what I propose to do in the interest of time, we are going to save the chat. and the chat will be sort of cleaned up and made legible and readable with the files that we send out to all of you who attended this evening's event. So with that, it is 6:10. There are other questions in here about RECs and financing. I propose that we conclude our call this evening. If you are interested in following up with Oriana, myself, Laura Burns, Chris, Tim, we will certainly, if it's okay with the speakers, add all of our contact information into the follow-up email, which will include the recording link. It will include all of our slides from this evening, and it will include the Google form that Oriana dropped into the chat. So if you are interested in running for the Light Board, please fill that form out, and Oriana or Claire from ELM will be in touch with you. If you are interested in joining Laura Burns and other folks on this call, Brian Folds, I didn't know you were on this call, Kimberly French, and others as part of MCAN's Green Muni or Municipal Light Plant advocacy groups, please get in touch with me or Laura Burns. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions. So we all believe in this call, and Chris set it up so well and so graciously, right? We believe in the power of community to create the future that we want. And in this case, it's a future that's based on energy efficiency, clean energy, so that we have breathable, safe air, both in our homes and buildings, since we're all working from home, most of us these days, but also outside. So really think about your munis as these climate innovators that can be part of the climate solution. And you as advocates, you know, you have the tools, you have the power, and you can get assistance from ELM, from MCAN, and from other folks on this call around your advocacy campaigns, around messaging, and around building relationships. It's all about building our relationships around a shared vision of a future. So with that, I wish you all a good night. Thank you again to our speakers for some really great presentations. And stay warm, stay safe, and look for our email in the next few days that will have all of these resources. Okay. Some of you have some fantastic artwork in the back. Oh, Rosemary, you were on the call. That's great. Excellent. Oh, Janet, you were on the call too. That's wonderful. There are a lot of people. Oh, and Ted was on the call. Fabulous. And Jerry, all right. I think people have walked away.